Thank you, Glynis. Thank you, Saranya, Kia, and Brent for being here today. We're going to switch gear today, this afternoon, and talk about disruptive innovation. I'm going to mention a few companies, early startup, pre-commercial, and some commercial that are, as Grant Stevens says, mover and shakers in the field, in the industry. So feel free to reach out to the companies that I'm going to name and mention. They have some disruptive technology that one day could be extremely disruptive and will be the new standard of care. But before we start, I would like to make a couple of comments. This morning, the word regenerative medicine was mentioned about 60 times, but never the word preventative medicine. So we can rewind the clock, but we cannot stop the clock. That would be an entire subject for the next panel. But let's talk about regenerative medicine, what it means, and the technologies that have been mentioned earlier today, and what is being used or starting to be used in the field. But before we do that, I know, Saranya, that your title is Associate Professor of Dermatology and Regenerative Medicine, and you are also teaching regenerative medicine. Can you give us, in a few words, the definition of regenerative medicine?
Absolutely. So there's been a paradigm shift in how we think about medicine. Medicine has really shifted from fighting disease to the concept of restoring health. And that's really where the area of regenerative medicine plays a role. It is a field where we use innate processes to describe and be able to regenerate or repair or rejuvenate different tissues and organs. And the regenerative toolkit is actually encompassing of a lot of different areas like we heard about today. So it can be based out of cellular, like stem cells, or acellular, like exosomes, and really scaffolds and how these different toolkits come together. It's also really important that we teach the next generation about these different principles in regenerative medicine, because it is very important at the level of medical students, graduate students, residents, and fellows to be equipped with a lexicon to be able to better educate our patients.
Great, thank you for this. So my friend Laurent Lautier is the CEO of a company called Uvance. It's a UK-based startup. And what they do is they harvest the fat, they extract the stem cell, they freeze the stem cell, and then when you need them, they release them to you so you can inject them into your patients. Recently also in Monaco a few weeks ago, Dr. Sophie Menkes mentioned about nanofat. She extracts the fat, she extracts the nanofat, and she re-injects them. I would like to know what you think about those technologies. You know, is the stem cell technology from Uvance, you know, the new future standard of care? And these questions go to Glynis and Brian.
Go ahead. So I have been doing fat transfer since 1996. I've been doing it for a long time, and I do like it. My issue with the fat is once I have a nanofat, it's gone through the mesh, I really have no stromal vascular cells, I have no immune cells, I have no adipocytes. I feel like I'm really injecting collagen. So I was a little surprised and happy to see that they had some longer results with the injections of the nanofat. In my own practice, I find that it doesn't last as long when you go to that level, but I'd like to see what they're doing to change it so that it can last longer. As far as the stem cells go, I love that idea. I think patients love to have something that's autologous, and so if they can come in and have their own body parts taken and used and developed so that you can then re-inject it to them, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I would more or less echo Glynis's comments. I do think it's extremely appealing. There is in any type of fat grafting, it's one thing if you're undergoing a surgical procedure already and you're just taking a few minutes to get some fat. It becomes a different thing if you're looking at the fact that the vast majority of injectables are done even outside of a physician's office these days. Becomes a little bit more challenging to make some of these models work as well. And I will also share Glynis' sense that I think that the concept is great, even from a results standpoint, it's great. But I think there's probably some more innovation that needs to happen before it's one of our mainstream tools that we start thinking about using to replace things that we're currently doing.
Saranya, what do you think about freezing stem cells and making them available for you at any point of time for your patients?
Yeah, so stem cells also have the concept that it's autologous but also varies from patient to patient. So similar to what that we see with PRP and stem cells, there's great variability, which also affects in how we are standardizing and validating these trials across the board. So because different patients produce different products, essentially that's hard to standardize and hard to really interpret the results across the board. Maybe there would be differences between patients. So to me, I think that's true of all cellular therapies, and that's really where the shift in trying to build off-the-shelf products or products that are scalable and accessible for patients is really going to be the next era.
Great. So about 10 or 15 years ago, PRP was introduced, right? We heard this morning that not all PRPs are created equal. Then Patrick Retief here in the room start mentioning about the exosome with his company Exocell Bio. Glynis, what are exosomes exactly?
So I think you've heard a lot of discussions about what they are, but basically for me, they are these micro extracellular vesicles. And again, they're acellular, so you're not dealing with anything but some microRNA, some messenger RNA, proteins, and growth factors. But they really do work. And in my practice, I use it for many of my post-skin cancer patients where I'll do an excision and perhaps I don't want to do a graft because it's going to look odd on that location on their face and they're younger and they don't want that look. And I can use exosomes and I can really transform the skin on how it heals. So I love using exosomes. I like it for scars. I like it topically. And we're using new devices like dermal electroporation where we can actually put the exosomes into the scalp for hair rejuvenation as well.
Great. Saranya, you're using human platelets extract, right? How are they different from exosome?
So human platelet extract is a version of exosomes. So they're platelet-derived exosomes. And I think when we look at exosome products, it's going to be really important to consider purification, batch consistency, isolation strategies, because as we heard earlier, certain isolation strategies can actually break that exostructure and render the product inert. So it's really important to be able to validate how pure is your product and how consistent is your product between different batches. But the human platelet extract or platelet-derived exosomes, those are some of the studies that we're working on.
Great. Kia, the question's for you and for Brian. As a plastic surgeons, do you think exosome, PRP, all those injectables, and regenerative medicine have a place in your practice?
Absolutely. 10, 20, 30 years ago, Botox was considered a isolated treatment for specific treatment. And here we are 20, 30 years later, and we see urologists are using it, OBGYNs are using it, everybody's using it. A lot of these regenerative medicine concepts go beyond the boundaries of any specific specialties. And as we've learned throughout the history of medicine, once one specialty figures something out, the science can go on to other specialties. And I think there is a great role for regenerative medicine. We listened to a panel earlier this morning. They were talking about nanofats. We use nanofats all the time. Now, if you ask me, do you use exosomes in your practice? Well, if I use fat injections or nanofat injections, you are introducing exosomes. Now, obviously, the way I think about exosome is exosomes are growth factors are your sort of the letters, and exosomes are your UPS. What you put in that exosome will determine the effect of the exosome. So I think the exosome is the next level of purity of what we're delivering to the area we're trying to treat. So that's the future of regenerative medicine. It's not isolated to dermatology or plastic surgery. I think all the specialties will benefit from it.
Brian, are exosomes going to be a replacement for fillers?
I don't think they're going to be a replacement for fillers, but I think exosomes can be extraordinarily helpful from a signaling standpoint, can complement fillers. I think fillers will continue to evolve, but I think exosomes in regenerative medicine will be an important part of that, and I see them evolving hand in hand as opposed to one completely replacing the other.
So today, exosomes are used most of the time off-label, right? They are not indicated, they are considered as cosmetic, they're not indicated for anything because most of those companies, except for Rio, with Alisa Last, they don't have the resources to do all the studies required by the FDA to get any indications or claim. Should companies like Allergan, Galderma acquire some of them and do what it is required from a regulatory standpoint to get those products approved for specific indications?
You've got issues now with the FDA and blood products and what you're using.
Right.
So they're pretty strict on it. So it is a hard thing to pass over and get through. But I think it's a great opportunity. Again, we talk about all these different devices and all these different procedures and all these different topicals, but in my practice, combination therapy works best. I mean, I'm a dermatologist, but for my patients, it's not one thing and they're done. It really is combination, and that's why whether it's a device, then followed by also some fillers, followed by some exosomes, followed by some topicals, but it really is working everything in conjunction. So I think having something in the armamentarium of all the different products is a good idea.
Great. So we're going to switch gear now, and we're going to talk about medical device and capital equipment. I want to try to cover the aesthetic arena as fast as possible. So when I look at medical devices, the big innovation of this year is Healthegy from Revere. We had a panel earlier this morning. Very quickly, thumbs up, thumbs down, what do you think? I'll start with Brian.
So I have to disclose that I was the safety monitor, medical safety monitor for the clinical trial. So I had access to see all that. I have not used the device. I've been actually locked out from using it myself. However, I'm very, very familiar with the technology, also very familiar with what actually happened in the trial. And I'm actually really enthusiastic about the device. I think that it will have a learning curve. I don't think it's going to be an extremely steep learning curve. It's not that complicated, but there certainly is a procedural component to it. But I think that it really potentially has a lot to offer in a changing cellular landscape. So yeah, I'm a thumbs up.
Yeah.
I give it a thumbs up. I actually just attended their faculty session in Park City a few months ago. As a surgeon, I like targeted treatments. So I like to know what I'm treating and be precise. And I think Avali gives me that precision. I looked at other technologies and other device, other pharma that's like work with an enzymatic process. And I like Avali because it's a targeted, precise technology. And I think it will give us a lot more things to handle in our practices. My only question, which I'm still kind of dealing with, is how to introduce it in a surgical practice from a logistical viewpoint that makes it cost-effective for my patients, efficacious for the patients, but on the other hand, also profitable for my practice. So when I spending time with the patients, it's profitable. One area I think there would be a great advantage as a surgeon, where I'm in the operating room, is combining it with some other body contouring procedures that I'm doing. For instance, I'm doing a tummy tuck. I can treat the cellulitis at the same time.
Sorry, yeah?
Yeah, I would agree. I would give it a thumbs up as well. At Mayo Clinic, we practice by the mantra that the needs of the patient come first, and this technology, I think, with its precision, definitely allows more for that consumer precision. So I'm excited to try it.
Glynis?
I think thumbs up, but I think you have to look at your patient population. There are other devices that do work for cellulite, and I think you really have to define, your patient's downtime. My patients do not like a lot of bruising and swelling and pain, so that's a negative on that part. And so I think you just have to kind of overall look at what your patients want and offer them that treatment. So I think it can be good in certain situations.
Great. Moving into capital equipment, AIS LMS is next weekend here in San Diego. I start to look at what's new in the capital equipment, and I identified two technologies. One is a VAVA from Irina Ehrenberg. She presented this morning her multifocal fractional laser, and another one developed by Shlomo Asa, Ultra Clear. Quick thumbs up, thumbs down. It's very early stage. They are not commercial yet, so I know you might not have the right experience or expertise with this technology, but if you do, what do you think about those new innovations? Brian?
Yeah, so the Aclaro device, which is an erbium fiber laser that has been re-engineered, it is, in my mind, I think has the real potential to be a major disruptor from a laser perspective. It is something that you can do because of the way the pulses are delivered. When I say there's minimal discomfort, we're doing resurfacing and sometimes deep resurfacing without using any anesthetic, topical or injectable, which I never. I'm a full ablative CO2 guy still, and I still do full ablative CO2. This I think really has the potential to be a game changer. I've had access to it for a couple months, so I do have experience with that. What I absolutely love about the Avava system that I think is so important that I hope we see more and more of is the fact that it utilizes imaging with the delivery of the energy. So it takes out the practitioner component, which I think is so critically important. I think that the entire team deserves so much credit for being the first to actually combine imaging with determining the amount of energy, depth of energy, and so forth. That's something we've needed for so long.
From a technological viewpoint, I think Avava is just going to be a game changer. You know, to be able to address all the different skin types. From a marketing viewpoint, and also I think it's a game changer. You know, we've been talking about how to advertise to all different backgrounds and races and ethnicities. Now we have a laser that actually can deliver treatments to all kinds of backgrounds and ethnicities. So I think from both fronts, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, patients often present with the conundrum of they want the effects of the recovery time of a downtime, low downtime, lunchtime laser, and then the results of a CO2 type of treatment. So I think Avava has sort of bridged those gaps in presenting a technology that's innovative but also accessible to a lot of different skin types and really gives you a lot of great results with low downtime. So I'm looking forward to that.
We are always looking for colorblind devices, and I think this is a big thumbs up.
Great. So Irina has also another company, S3 Inject, and it's a magic needle or a smart needle that when you use in the hub, there is a microchip with an LED light, and as you poke through the skin, if you go through a blood vessel, there's a red LED light, which is triggered by the presence of blood. So it's a safety device. What do you think? She won, IMCAS-based Innovation of the Year. That was a couple of years ago. If a brand A was offering this technology over your current existing brand that you're using, would you switch over to that brand just for the safety opportunity to have? Glynis, you want to start?
I love the idea of safety. I think that is so important. I would love a needle like that. I don't think it would be the final decision for me. There are other devices like Clarius. There's ultrasound devices that you can use on the skin to notify where you are in the vascular areas and things like that. So I don't think for me it would be a change for sure, although I'd love to have a needle like that. I think that in many situations, though, people are doing a lot of injections and not necessarily as well trained as they need to be. So I think that would be kind of an absolute must in certain practices.
Yeah, it addresses a very important problem related to filler complications, and I think there is the debate versus aspiration versus utilizing these new technologies that are coming out. But I think for me, it would really depend on the sensitivity and the specificity of this technology to see, how sensitive is it to detecting blood vessels and how specific really before utilizing this option.
I think it's a great novel idea. Obviously, every time we do any procedure, safety is the #1 concern. But at the same time, efficacy is important. And we know not all fillers are created equal. So if one brand has the needle but doesn't have the product, I'm not sure I would change to that product. Before this needle, obviously, cannulas were introduced. But not everybody uses cannulas, and we did not change. And none of the companies are providing the cannulas with their products. So I think it's a great novel idea, but I'm not sure it's going to be the game changer in terms of changing one brand versus the other brand.
But if you could buy the needle for, let's say, $3 or $4, would you buy it?
For certain areas in the face, yes, I think as it was mentioned, it depends on who the injector is, the level of the expertise.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the concept obviously is a phenomenal one. It would be great if it could be used, or if we're coming a variety of different delivery systems, whether different caliber needles, different gauge needles, and so forth. But could I see it being a game changer? Yeah, I think, as been suggested, certain limited areas, 100% for sure. Is it going to be what I use in every single patient for everything I do? Not necessarily, but I think very possibly game changer for certain areas.
Right. Switching gear again, Elon Blumenfeld here in the room presented his technology of fat melting injectable. for submental fat, but also body contouring. Do we need another fat melting injectable based on the failure of Kybella? Is that a huge unmet need? What do you think about the technology?
I think it is. I think that, we did part of the study and we were really happy with the results. And I think that anything you can do in one session is always great. Patients like that, especially if they're going to have any kind of downtime and they can do it in one session and be done. And so if you're picking the right patients and you're picking areas, pockets of fat, I think this is something that people really want.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. Patient selection is really important, and I don't think it's an area where we need to shut the door on innovation here. I think the results were incredible, and really follow the science. And if the results are showing, what they are, and if you can follow them long term in post-marketing surveillance, I think that's really going to lead where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I think we'll come down to the result, as was mentioned. I want to see the long-term results and the reproducibility of the result. I mean, I still am a big fan of devices like cool sculpting that you can do a more generalized treatment that also have some skin contraction, so you have a more homogeneous, larger area you treat as opposed to targeted areas. So I think if you have a small target that you're going after, I think it would be a good solution for those, but I wouldn't just use that instead of other devices.
Got it. Brian?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a role, a lot of factors involved, swelling, downtime. Certainly cost is one. Is it going to be applicable for broader areas? Depends on the logistics. But yeah, I think that there's certainly a desire for consumers to reduce unwanted fat.
Okay, so it's almost the end of this panel, of our session. So I have one last question for you. We're in 2027, 5 years down the road, and your answer to my question is, I told you so. So if you take your crystal ball, what did you say today that will happen in 2027? What is your prediction? Glynis?
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me and in my practice is I really try to take a look at the patient and the whole patient. So we don't just talk about putting things in their face or doing devices. We talk about also nutrition and health and hormones and all that. And I really think that kind of that hormone pattern and stem cells and exosomes and all that are going to be that regenerative medicine where people really want to look and feel younger, feel like they're living longer, and they probably are going to live longer. I think growth hormones and metformin and DHEA, I think all of those things are going to be kind of combined into what we do and help people live longer, look better, and feel better.
Great. Saranya?
As a dermatologist scientist, I truly believe that the science of aging is going to shift our field. Looking at root causes of why and how our skin ages, things like hallmarks of aging. So my lab studies cellular senescence and how that accumulates with age. So I think factors like senescence and other things that contribute to the root cause of aging, combined with how we can holistically create regenerative medicine techniques into our practice. So that's really where I think 2027 is going to take us.
Great. Yeah.
As it was just mentioned, I think the hallmarks of aging is going to be the key. Being able to create treatments that disrupt all those 8 hallmarks of aging. And I think the big thing is going to be in the lifespan of an individual, can we expand the pre-rejuvenation part, the healthy part of the life? The technology that you mentioned earlier, harvest the cells, maybe 10 years later, re-inject them, that you still have the youthful cells to re-inject. That would be the future.
I actually would look at technology. I think there's so many ways we can apply it. We didn't hear about it today, but there's companies working on AI to look at how to, what changes do we need to make so that we don't get these crazy, weirdly over-injected people in the wrong place, so forth. It needs to be adjusted for various races, various genders, various ethnicities. But I think there's tremendous opportunity for AI, for information sharing. We're all silos out there. I have no way of knowing what you're doing, what kind of results you're getting, what's working for you, and vice versa. We all need to be able to share better. And as I mentioned, I think using imaging systems that can help with our aesthetic devices and deliver our treatments in a far smarter way to take out the operator component or to minimize the operator component is something that we should be able to do. They can do it in radiation oncology so well. And we just need to be able to do that better in aesthetics, which I think we can.
Thank you to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you again next year.